Hi, everybody. This is Lowell, and we're talking about how to start a music school. And initially, my thesis is start with why. And with that why, I've been describing my why that hopefully can relate to you and your decisions. And I'm going to do a deep dive into some foundational beliefs that I have about my why. And, you may totally disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. But I wanted to establish a framework for why I'm building this music school. And it has to do with our, uh, our understanding of the power of music and to regain our understanding of our Western culture and our understanding of the intangibles, as I talked about in the last video, and to reestablish our roots as a society in understanding culture and understanding music and the power of music and the understanding the power of the Western mindset. And in my view, it's impossible to separate Western art music from the Western tradition. And the Western tradition is arguably linked to the Judeo-Christian uh, viewpoint um, of life and of what of the meaning of life. And if you go back to Western art music's beginning, which in my estimation started with around the time of Bach, but really goes back much deeper than that into um, the worship that's found in the Bible, even back to King David. And I believe that we have lost a lot of the power of what music can can do. We've relegated music to either entertainment or some sort of selling mechanism uh, that relates to commerce or some sort of lesser power that music has to offer. And in order for us to regain Western history and the power of the Christian message, the Judeo-Christian message that's found in the Bible, and the power of Western art music in our culture, and how to um, inspire a new generation of young people in these concepts. If we don't do that, then we're going to lose the value uh, of what we have that's taken centuries, even millennia to develop. We're on the verge of losing that, and so it's incumbent upon um, all of us to come together and to regain that power. And so I'm going to I guess do an overview of what I'd like to cover, and then start delving into it in subsequent videos. But constitutional scholars, and I've said this in earlier videos, will show the Western history, the history of the Western culture going back to essentially Abraham. And one of the things in the Judeo-Christian tradition and heritage of the Bible that really shows pattern in design that music functions within is the pattern of the tabernacle, of Moses' tabernacle. And so what happened is that Moses was led up to the mountain and came into God's presence, and God spoke to Moses, and he says, I'm going to show you a pattern, and I want you to make this pattern on purpose, and you make it exactly this way. And I'm not going to tell you exactly why, but I need you to follow my instruction. Make this tabernacle, this tent, in this pattern. And so the meaning of that is fascinating, and it actually bears weight in the establishment of what I'm going to share with you about how music is made and how music can be seen in its power. But that pattern was three parts, and it was the outer court, the inner court, and the Holy of Holies. And the Holy of Holies is where the Ark of the Covenant was. And then the inner court, that middle section, had three components in it. It had the candelabra, which is called the menorah, which had, it's that Jewish candlestick thing, kind of webs. And then you have your showbread, which was a table with bread on it, and then you had your incense table. And those three things, and they correlate to something that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. So then you go, that's your pattern that's seen in the Old Testament of the Bible. All right, and I'm a Christian, so I'm talking about the Judeo-Christian tradition from the standpoint of Christian theology. So now we're in the New Testament, and Jesus makes a statement to the religious leaders of his day, and he says, "Tear this temple down, and in 3 days I will raise it up." And they, in the commentary of that written text, it says that everybody thought he was talking about the temple, and it's like, well, how can you tear this down? It's too hard to tear it down and for sure rebuild it in 3 days. And then it says, but he was speaking of the temple of his body. Okay, so there's a correlation now where Jesus is referencing that pattern of that temple that Moses was told, make this tent, this tabernacle in this pattern. And then Jesus is saying, I am, my body is this pattern. All right, and then you go further into the New Testament, and the Apostle Paul actually echoes this, and he says, know ye not that you are the temple of the Holy Spirit? He's speaking to Christians. And Paul, in later writings, actually delineates the tripartite nature of man in one of his letters to the Thessalonians, and he says, may the God of peace sanctify you entirely, spirit and soul and body. All right, and so he shows that there are three parts to the human experience, just like there's three parts to the tabernacle of the Old Testament that are the outer court, inner court, and Holy of Holies, respectively. All right, so what I'm going to show you is that pattern that Moses was shown is actually the Messiah, Jesus, but it's also us. And our humanity is that we are made in three parts: spirit, soul, and body. All right, and so I'm not going to go much farther in that theology, but I'm going to take that middle section of the tabernacle to talk about these three parts. All right, a minute ago I talked about the menorah, the table of showbread, and the incense table. That correlates to what we understand as the soul of man. And if you look up the word soul in a Bible dictionary in the Old Testament, it's the word leb, L-E-B, leb, and that word means mind, emotions, and will. So how music functions, music has a spiritual component to it, in worship, but the majority of musical expression is meant to communicate to our souls. And so music functions in primarily these three areas to influence people. It functions in the area of your mind in terms of patterns, in terms of the message that's being conveyed, many times in lyrics, but also in pattern and design through motivic development. Music functions to influence our will. As you know, we've talked about the use of music to sell, to motivate people to buy things. It causes people to make decisions. You put a military drum line out in front of an army to inspire them. You put a marching band, that's playing for football to motivate their team to greater effort. And so music has the capacity to move people's will, their decisions, their choices. And then, of course, we all know and very familiar with music's power to emotionally touch our lives. But all three of those are important. Most people are aware only of the emotional aspect of music, but these other aspects of mind and will are also very important in understanding music. And I wanted to share a couple of stories with you from the Judeo-Christian tradition of the Bible, and they relate directly to the power that music has that I believe that we have lost in our appreciation of culturally. And this is a story of King David. And many people don't realize that King David was a very skillful musician and wrote much of the Psalms that we have, the book of Psalms in the Bible. And so he was a composer, and even his son Solomon wrote many songs. But David had musical instruments made. And so there was a time where King Saul was disobeying God, and he was experiencing emotional turmoil, and essentially the Bible says it was an evil spirit, that he was experiencing a spiritual darkness. And so in order to solve that, he needed help, and how he received help was from a musical experience that David ended up giving him. And so this is a passage from that. King Saul was saying, I need help, and so can somebody find me a musician? And then it says, then one of the young men said, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite. It's talking about King David, who wasn't king yet. Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, who is a skillful musician. Notice that's named first. David was a skillful musician. That was the first quality that was listed here to describe David, who is a skillful musician, a mighty man of valor, a warrior, one prudent in speech, a handsome man, and the Lord is with him. And of course, David wrote that famous psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. That famous psalm. And so David wrote that most likely out in the sheep fields, tending sheep as he was practicing and playing on his harp, making up songs. So King Saul sent to Jesse, saying, let David now stand before me, for he has found favor in my sight. So it came about, whenever the evil spirit from God came to Saul, David would take the harp and play it with his hand, and Saul would be refreshed and be made well, and the evil spirit would depart from him. All right, so what happened is David expressed this music in a way that caused power to come out of his musical expression into King Saul's life, to cause this darkness and this evil to depart from him, this essentially spiritual evil to depart from King Saul. And that's what I'm trying to do here in this discussion is I'm trying to tie together our Judeo-Christian Western tradition with the power of music that's embedded in it. And so if we are honest with ourselves in terms of what we have that we can use to the benefit of other people, we have to come to the understanding that we have lessened the power of music to help people. And if we're honest with who we are as a culture, then we will try to regain for a new generation what the power of music has to offer. And that's what I'm trying to show you here, is that we can raise up a new generation of young people who actually are not just simply playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in countless recitals. We can raise up a generation that actually expects the power of music to change people's lives. And that's my my message to you today. Now, David went on as he became, as you know, Saul went by the wayside, and David became king. And David actually brought music up to its highest pinnacle, its highest use, which was to establish the most highly trained musicians in all of Israel, and teams of those musicians to function around the tabernacle to minister and minister in worship and music to God, in relationship to God, to provide music 24 hours a day in worship at the highest level. And so that was David's perception. King David's perception of the power of music was to not only minister to people as he did to King Saul, but also to minister directly to God, in relationship to God in worship. And so what I'm trying to say, my why, as we're dealing with why, is to regain and reclaim the actual power that music has to offer, instead of just it being some aspect of culture that is laughed at, essentially. We'll pay a football player, and I'm not trying to make statements against anybody's profession, but I'm making a comment about our social priorities. It will pay for certain aspects of our culture that may not be representative of our highest values, and then we'll relegate a music teacher to well, that's just boring, or not important, or as our current educational system seems to think that STEM type of education, STEM understandings are more important than music, and just sweep aside the arts where they're non-relevant out of our educational mindset. But I believe that music has great value, much greater value than what we're giving it.